Hi, sweeties.
Hi.
How are you doing?
I'm okay. How are you?
I'm very well. I'm very well. Yeah, I just had dinner. I had a big load of ice cream after dinner. So that's about as good a position as it's possible to be in. So I'm feeling pretty darn pleased. How are you, beautiful people?
Okay. Tired, but okay.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Andrada? How are you doing?
Pretty good.
Excellent.
I also just had dinner. I made a very nice skull and skink.
Oh, Cullen skink.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Also, I'm getting all ready.
You are getting so fluffy. It's adorable. I really, really like it. Like, will you just do a little bit of a like? Will you just like floof yourself a little bit?
It doesn't floof anymore. This is it.
Floofy it is. Yes. Very.
A very nice dance together yesterday with people on Zoom, the same people that I used to dance in the park, but because, you know, we're not allowed and it's really cold. I was like, hey, let's put this on Zoom. And instead of having strange, no sound movement improv of whatever happens, we had a boogie to club music and other things, and it was just hilarious.
That sounds incredible. That sounds very
We're all
joyous.
coming up really close and making faces at each other.
It's the best way to ensure the best possible experience. Get very close to each other and make faces. Mm-hmm. We have an M. Hi, M. A secret M.
Hi.
Hi. How are you doing?
Edinburgh.
Edinburgh. Edinburgh. Woo, woo, woo. Edinburgh. Edinburgh. It's the Edinburgh song. Very important.
So clearly, it's great.
I'm having a lovely time. It's so nice. We did some dancing. We did some dancing tonight.
I'm so happy for you / jealous, but mostly so happy for you. You did some dancing.
And we had ice cream. Oh my God, can I tell you about this ice cream? May I? May I?
Of course, please. Can you? Will you please tell us about this ice cream?
Yes, I don't wish to be bold, but I must. My feelings can be restrained no longer. I must tell you about this ice cream. Zach's here. Hi, Zach.
Hello.
Let me tell you about this ice cream. So I had some ice cream. Tonight.
Ice cream?
3 flavors. It was from Mary's Milk Bar. Guess what the 3 flavors were.
Ooh,
an octopus.
You're so right.
Who cares? Mary's Milk Bar makes amazing ice cream.
Yeah. Did they do the creamy dill one? Because, oh my God, I'm still dreaming about that from years ago.
Cream? I haven't, no, but now I want that. I want that one.
It was just like creamy and a teensy bit sweet with dill in it. It was just like very earthy. Oh, it was lovely.
Oh.
Anyways, what did you eat? Tell us.
Well. Number 1 was chocolate, but whoa, slow down there. Not chocolate as you're imagining, not like chocolate ice cream. This was like chocolate. It's the best chocolate ice cream. It's the best chocolate ice cream. Maybe not as good as that swoon. Different
Okay.
to the swoon one.
Okay.
Different to the swoon one.
Okay, how are they different? I want to hear about this other good chocolate ice cream too. I need a solid ice cream analysis, please.
Okay, so this one was like chocolate flavored double cream. It's so smooth and thick and velvety and silky and creamy, and you put it in your mouth and it like immediately coats the entire of the inside of your mouth, and then like your mouth is like putting your hand in like a velvet glove. That's what this
is putting its hand in a velvet. Wait a minute.
Please leave a review on their Facebook page.
This is some fucked up shit, guys.
Mm-hmm. Whereas the swoon chocolate ice cream is more like, what's the swoon chocolate ice cream like?
Technically, that's a sorbet, which makes the whole change.
Yes, that exactly. It's like somehow if you got the best chocolate that there is and took away the creamy aspect but left all of the deliciousness, so it's not bitter or hi Ariane, hi Rory.
Hi.
It's like sweet frozen earth. You know, if you imagine, you know, like really beautiful soil, like the kind of soil that when you're digging it, you're like, I bet this is delicious for you plants. Like I kind of wish that I was a plant so that I could get like my roots all in amongst that like rich kind of black loamy peaty soil.
Like crumbled real vibes.
If that
Like you
was
sink your
ice
hand
cream,
into it and it's just
yeah, like cake mixture, like a Guinness chocolate cake that you've taken out of the oven a little bit before it's done, so it's so moist and soft and just kind of like falling into this delicious crumb. That is what the swoon one is like.
I need to order some chocolate ice cream now. We've
yeah, I'm weirdly hungry now after all.
I mean, I just had ice cream, so I'm fine.
Oh, you say you're fine,
Wasn't
but
like the spoon
it's
one.
ice cream.
Wasn't that ice
So,
cream?
may I tell you the other two, and then I promise I will stop talking and someone else can talk for a bit.
And you can test stories.
The second one was pistachio and cardamom, and it was just exactly as beautiful as you would imagine that being. It was like an exquisite evening gown made of silk. And then the other one was quince and goat's cheese.
Ooh.
I was beside myself.
Do you have a moment?
I had a moment and a half. I embarrassed myself horribly. It's so good. It's like light, like creamy, but not at all heavy. There's a kind of zestiness to it, but it's definitely not lemon flavored. It's kind of like whipped almost. And yeah, this like sort of sweet, savory, zesty, light, creamy flavor that's just offset by this beautiful kind of like rich, fruity, but not overly sweet quince stuff. Oh,
I think you might need to do ice cream descriptions next from wine.
Yes, I will. Yes. I wanted to put it, if I'm honest. I wanted to make an honest ice cream of it. You know? So that's been my evening. How are y'all?
I just
not
caught
quite
up.
that good.
I
Who's
just
that?
caught up on the things from last week,
Uh-huh.
and I like that you were like, Ariane, I'm so sorry for my Italian accent, and I was like, I had not noticed that Samuel had an Italian accent. That had not registered as Italian to me.
That is, I mean, I don't think it would register as Italian to anyone.
So I wasn't offended.
I'm so glad.
I was like crocheting and I heard Ariane in the after chat and I was like, what? And I was like,
Oh
so
man,
like I put it back and I was like, Samuel's Italian?
I wish I hadn't said anything. Man, you just wouldn't have noticed. God damn it. Pretend I didn't say anything. Yeah, I don't know how to do. I didn't want to like didn't want to be like, you know, like a kind of sort of Mario style, like.
If Samuel is in the episode tonight, I shall be paying close attention.
Oh no! Oh.
Or any of the episode following this.
Well, if he's in any of the episodes following this, I might like reach out to you and be like, how do I say this and have it sound Italian? Like, can you record a bunch
It's fine.
of
I enjoyed all of Chocolate's pronunciation. I can deal with Samuel.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for reading. It's fine.
As Katie's not here, should I ask if it's story time?
It's story time. Sorry.
Katie sent me a message saying they were catching up. They should be done by 10 past, but if they were not quite there, would we wait for them? So when...
No, it's not story time.
Not story time.
And it's Katie's asking to delay story time. I can't believe it.
Let me know when she... Rory, my darling, you look like you have a thing.
Yeah, just if we've got time, I got some minor but neat news. So I think you know, actually. Yeah, so in our local park, we've been trying to like befriend all the animals. And today, for the first time, I've had the squirrels eating out of my hands before, but now I can just go up to like a tree and hold it up to the branch, and they'll like run down and eat. Yeah. So
Do they recognize you?
I don't know.
I think that
Maybe.
during the time that we were there, got used to us because we were just sitting hanging out with squirrels for quite a while today, actually.
Yeah.
I love you two so much.
Yeah, it was so nice, and like especially there's like a special, I don't know, serotonin burst or something that happens when like you're holding a peanut or whatever, and then they when they steady your fingertip with one of their paws just very lightly while they take the it's very gratifying.
If either of you felt like posting that video in Storytime, if that was something that you were interested in sharing, I think that everybody would react like I reacted.
Oh, Katie's here. Hey, Katie. Hey, Nick.
Katie's here. Hi, Katie. Hi, Nick.
But
Nick, your hair looks great.
Did you
Why,
wait,
thank you.
Rory, did you feel like a Disney princess?
A little bit. I whistled a little tune and everything.
Ah.
Now. Okay. Katie, what time is it?
It's story time, Frankie.
Okay, now I'm gonna mute you all right? I'm gonna mute you all, and then I'm gonna give the content warnings. If anybody has any questions about the content warnings or would like to kind of get more clarification, feel free to unmute yourself and ask. Because this is quite a kind of the drama hereby begins. It will all be okay in the end, but this is going to be a lot. Okay, so I'm gonna mute you all. I'm gonna mute you all. Mute all. Right. So, content warnings. Harm to an animal, mental health stuff, involuntary incarceration. Men are terrible. This is going to get dramatic. It will all be okay in the end, but there's going to be some shit go down. So if anybody has anything that they want to say or ask or nope out at this point, go with my love and happiness and a huge cuddle. But if not, are you sitting comfortably? then I'll begin. I didn't expect to see anyone on my way out. I should have. Several society men were staying as Locke's honoured guests, occupying the gaudy guest suites on the second floor, and the house was still crawling with hired servants cleaning up after the party. But running away from home involves a very particular and time-worn script. Bad and I were supposed to slip out the front door and down the drive like a pair of ghosts. Later, Locke might storm up to my room and find my note, uninformative but apologetic, thanking him for years of generosity and kindness, and swear softly. He might stare out the window after me, far too late. Except Mr. Locke was standing in the foyer, and so was Mr. Havermeyer. "Just a child, Theodore. I'll have it all sorted out in a day or two." Locke was standing with his back to me, one arm making the confident gestures of a banker reassuring a nervous patron, the other holding Havermeyer's coat. Havermeyer was reaching for it, face narrowed in doubt, when he saw me standing on the staircase. "Ah, your prize malcontent, Cornelius." Havermeyer's smile was only a smile in the sense that his lips were curved and his teeth were bared. Locke turned. I watched his face move from cold disapproval to consternation, his mouth falling slightly open. Under that frowning, what's all this nonsense gaze, I felt myself falter. The swooping, heady confidence that had taken me this far, dressing myself in my sturdiest clothes, stuffing a canvas bag full of semi-random belongings, writing 2 notes and arranging them artistically, wavered, and I felt suddenly very much like a child announcing she was running away from home. It occurred to me that I'd packed at least 9 or 10 books, but not a single pair of spare socks. Locke opened his mouth, chest swelling with the coming sermon, but I'd just realised something. If he was down here with Havermeyer, he was clearly finished meeting with Jane. But she hadn't come back. "Where's Jane?" I interrupted. She was supposed to return to our room and find the note I'd hidden in Tom Swift and his airship. Then she would join me in Boston, book passage on an eastbound steamer and begin our adventure. If she wanted to. My clever plan evaded the necessity of asking her face to face and the possibility of hearing her say no. Locke's face had whitened in irritation. "Return to your room, child. I'll deal with you later. In fact, you are hereby confined to your quarters until such time as I deem—" "Where's Jane?" Havermeyer, watching, drawled, "It's comforting to find you aren't only rude when drunk, Miss Scala." Locke ignored him. "January, upstairs, now." His voice had gone low and urgent. I looked away from his face, but felt his pale eyes grasping and fastening on my flesh, prodding me backward. "Return to your room." But I was tired of listening to Mr. Locke, tired of the weight of his will crushing me smaller and smaller, tired of minding my place. "No." It came out a wavering whisper. I swallowed, touching my fingers to Bad's bronze heat. "No, I'm leaving." I ducked my head and squared my shoulders like a woman walking into a strong headwind, and heaved my bag down the steps and across the foyer. I kept my spine very straight. We were almost past them, almost within reach of the brass handle of the front door, when Havermeyer laughed. It was a hideous, high-pitched hiss that made Bad's hackles rise beneath my palm. I looped my fingers through his collar. "And where could a thing like you possibly be going?" he asked. He lifted his cane and gave my canvas sack a mocking prod. "To find my father." was tired of lying too. Havermeyer's not smile turned saccharine. Something unseemly, anticipation, delight, lit his eyes as he leaned toward me and curled one gloved finger beneath my chin, tilting my face upward. "You're late, father, I think you mean." I should have let go of Bad's collar right then and let him chew Havermeyer into red ribbons. I should have slapped him, or ignored him, or lunged for the door. Anything but what I actually did. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe he's just lost out there somewhere. Maybe he found a door and fell through it and he's in some other world, a better world where there aren't people like you. As comebacks go, it was somewhere between outright lunacy and pitiable. I waited for Mr. Locke's sigh, for that sibilant sound that passed for laughter from Havermeyer. But instead, both of them went very still. It was the kind of stillness that makes the hairs on your arms stand up and makes you think of wolves and snakes waiting in the high grass. The kind of stillness that makes you realize you have just misstepped very badly, even if you don't see how. Mr. Havermeyer straightened, letting my chin fall and flexing his hands in his driving gloves as if they'd grown restless. "Cornelius, I thought we'd agreed to keep certain information preserved for society members. I thought, in fact, that it was an essential tenet of our organization, as laid down by the founder himself." For the second time that morning, I had the sensation that the conversation was suddenly being conducted in an unfamiliar language. "I didn't tell her a damn thing." Locke's voice was brusque, but there was a strangled note in it I might have called fear, except I'd never heard Locke afraid. Havermeyer's nostrils flared. "Is that so?" he breathed. "Luke Evans!" A pair of hulking men thumped down the stairs at his shout, half-packed luggage in their arms. "Mr. Havermeyer, sir," they panted. "Escort this girl to her room, won't you, and lock her in. And watch out for the dog." I've always hated it in books when a character freezes in fear. "Wake up!" I want to shout at them. "Do something!" Remembering myself standing there with my canvas bag hanging stupidly over my shoulder, my fingers gone slack on Bad's collar, I want to shout at myself, "Do something!" But I was a good girl, and I didn't do anything. I was silent as Havermeyer tapped his cane to hurry his men along, as Locke huffed and protested, as heavy-knuckled hands closed above my elbows. As Bad erupted, snarling and brave, and one of the men threw a heavy coat over his thrashing head and tackled him to the floor. I was half dragged up the stairs and slung into my bedroom, and the lock rolled and snicked into place like the oiled metal hammer of Mr. Locke's revolver. I didn't make any sound at all, until I heard furious barking and men swearing, and then a series of boot-on-flesh thuds, and then hideous silence. And by then it was too late. Let that be a lesson to you. If you are too good and too quiet for too long, it will cost you. It will always cost you in the end. Bad, 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 bad. I scrabbled at the door, twisting the knob until my wrist bones creaked. Men's voices spiraled up the stairs and slid under my door, but I couldn't hear them over the rattling of the hinges and an awful, sourceless moaning. It was only when I caught Havermeyer's irritated voice on the landing, "Can someone shut her up?" that I realised the sound was coming from me. I stopped. Heard Havermeyer shout back down the steps, "Get that out of here and clear up this mess, Evans." And then there was nothing but the thunderous shushing of blood in my ears and the silent sound of my own unravelling. I was 7 again, and Wilder's key had just turned in the black iron lock and left me caged and alone. I remembered the walls pressing me between them like a botanical specimen, the sick, sweet taste of syrup on a silver spoon, the smell of my own terror. I thought I'd forgotten, but the memories were crisp as photographs. I wondered dispassionately if they'd always been there, lurking just out of sight and whispering their fears to me. If behind every good girl lurked a good threat. Shuffling, swearing noises from the distant parlour. Bad. My legs bent beneath me and I slid down the door thinking, this is what alone feels like. I only thought I knew before, but now Jane was gone and Bad was taken, and I might rot away to cotton and dust in this shabby grey room and no one on earth would care. That black thing descended again and settled its coal smoke wings around my shoulders. Motherless, fatherless, friendless. It was my own fault. My fault for thinking I could just run away, just gather my nerve and walk out into the wide unknown like a hero beginning a quest. For thinking I could bend the rules just a little and write myself into some better, grander story. But the rules were made by Locks and Havermeyers, by wealthy men in private smoking rooms who pulled the world's riches to themselves like well-dressed spiders in the centre of a golden web. People of significance, people who could never be locked away in small rooms and forgotten. The best I could hope for was a life spent creeping in their generous shadows, an in-between creature neither loved nor reviled, but permitted to scurry freely so long as I didn't cause trouble. I pressed the heels of my palms into my eyes. I wanted to cast a spell and unspool the last 3 days, to find myself standing innocent and bemused in the Pharaoh room, reaching for the blue chest. I wanted to disappear back into the 10,000 doors, to lose myself in Addie's impossible adventures. But Jane had taken the book, and Jane was gone. I wanted to find a door and write my way through it. But that was madness. Except there was the book, which echoed my own memory. And Jane's urgent, black-eyed expression when she held it. And Havermeyer and Locke freezing at the barest mention of doors. What if... I teetered on that invisible cliff's edge, holding myself back from the seething, teeming ocean below. I stood up slowly and crossed to the dresser. My jewellery box was an old sewing box I'd stood on end and stuffed with the accumulated treasures of 17 years. Feathers and stones, trinkets from the Pharaoh room, letters from my father folded and refolded so many times the creases were translucent. I ran a finger along the lining until I felt the cool edge of a coin. The Queen smiled her foreign silver smile at me, just as she had when I was 7. The coin was heavy in my palm, quite real. I felt a dizzy rushing, as if some great-winged seabird had swooped through the centre of me, trailing salt and cedar and the familiar but not familiar sun of another world. I took a breath, and then another. Madness. But my father was dead, and my room was locked, and Bad needed me, and there was no way out except through madness. I dove over that unseen edge and plunged into the dark waters below, where the unreal became real, where the impossible swam by on glimmering fins, where I could believe it all. And in believing came a sudden calm. I tucked the coin into my skirt and crossed to the writing desk beneath the window. I found a scrap of half-used paper and smoothed it against the desktop. I paused for a moment, gathering every speck of my dizzy, drunken belief, then took up the pen and wrote. The door opens. It happened just as it had when I was 7 and still young enough to believe in magic. The pen nib swirled around the period, and the universe seemed to exhale around me, to shrug its invisible shoulders. The light streaming through my windows, gone dim and watery with afternoon clouds, seemed suddenly more golden. Behind me, the hinges creaked open. A heady, giggling sense of madness threatened to swallow me up, followed by aching tiredness, a gluey, dizzying darkness that pulsed behind my eyes, but I didn't have time for it. Bad. I ran on shaking legs, flashing past a few startled guests, past display cases with their neat brass labels, and flung myself down the staircase. The scene in the foyer had changed. Havermeyer was gone, the front door still standing open behind him, and Mr. Locke was speaking to one of his hulking manservants in a terse, low voice. The man was nodding, wiping his hands on a white towel and leaving behind rust-coloured smears. Blood. Bad! I'd meant to scream it, but my chest had gone airless and tight. Their faces swung toward me. What have you done? Now I was almost whispering. Neither of them answered me. Havermeyer's man was looking at me with an unnerved, blinking expression, like a man who doubted the evidence of his own eyes. I locked her in, sir. I swear I did, just like Mr. Havermeyer said. Howdy, be quiet, Locke hissed, and the man's jaw snapped shut. Get out, now. The man scurried out the door after his master, looking over his shoulder at me with fearful suspicion. Locke turned back to me, his hands rising in either placation or frustration. I didn't care which. Where's Bad? There still wasn't enough air in my lungs, as if my ribcage were caught in a giant fist. What did they do to him? How could you let them? Sit down, child. The hell I will. I'd never spoken to anyone that way in my life, but now my limbs were shivering with something hot and towering. Where is he? And Jane, I need Jane. Let go of me. Mr. Locke had crossed to the stairs and grabbed my chin roughly, fingers pressing into my jaw. He tilted my face upward, eyes on mine. Sit down. My legs shuddered and folded beneath me. He caught one arm and half carried me into the nearest side room, the safari room, a parlour filled with taxidermied antelope heads and masks made of dark, tropical wood, and slung me into an armchair. I clung to it, reeling and dizzied and still racked with that sick exhaustion. Locke dragged another chair across the room, rucking up the rug beneath its feet, and sat so close in front of me his knees pressed against mine. He leaned back in a posture of false calm. I've tried very hard with you, you know, he said conversationally. All these years spent caring for you, polishing you, protecting you. Of all the items in my collections, I've treasured you most of all. His fist closed in frustration. And yet you insist on flinging yourself into danger. Mr. Locke, please. Bad. He leaned forward, arctic eyes on mine, hands resting on the arms of my chair. Why couldn't you learn to mind your place? His voice went low on the last 3 words, heavy with some foreign, guttural accent I didn't recognize. I flinched. He leaned away and drew in a long breath. Tell me, how did you get out of your room? And how in the name of every god did you find out about the aberrations? Does he mean doors? For the first time since I'd heard those awful boot-on-flesh sounds, Bad was driven entirely out of my mind. But nothing seemed to replace it except the distant thought that Mr. Locke had certainly not given me the 10,000 doors. It wasn't your father, I think we can be fairly sure. Those tepid little postcards barely had enough room for postage. Locke snorted through his moustache. Was it that damned African? I blinked at him. Jane? Oh, she does have something to do with it then. I suspected as much. We'll track her down later. Track her? Where is she? She was dismissed this morning. Her services, whatever they might have been, are certainly no longer needed. But you can't. My father hired Jane. You can't just get rid of her. As if that mattered. As if I could get Jane back through some technicality or loophole. Your father no longer employs anyone, I'm afraid. Dead people rarely do. But that's not our chief concern right now. Somewhere in the conversation, Locke had lost his wrathful edge and become clipped, cool, dispassionate. He might have been presenting at a board meeting or dictating orders to Mr. Sterling. In fact, it hardly matters how you came by your information at this juncture. What matters is that you know entirely too much, entirely too independently, and had the infinitely poor judgment to reveal such knowledge to one of our, more imprudent members. He gave a little sigh and a what-can-you-do shrug. Theodore employs rather rough and ready means, and I'm afraid he'll be even more excited by your little magic trick with the locked door. Well, he's young. He's older than you. Is this how Alice felt, tumbling through the rabbit hole? And so I must find a way to keep you safe, keep you hidden. I've already made a few calls. I floundered, free-falling. Calls to whom? Friends, clients, you know. He waved a square hand. I've found you a place. I've been told it's very professional, very modern and comfortable. Nothing like those Victorian dungeons they used to throw people into. Battleborough has an excellent reputation. He nodded at me as if I should be pleased to hear it. Battleborough? Wait. My chest seized. Battleborough Retreat. The asylum. I'd heard the name whispered among Locke's guests. It was where rich people put their mad maiden aunts and inconvenient daughters. But I'm not crazy. They won't take me. Locke's expression turned almost pitying. Oh, my dear, haven't I taught you the value of money yet? And besides, as far as anyone knows, you're a little half-breed orphan who heard about her father's death and started gabbling about magic doors. It took a little extra convincing for them to overlook your colouring, I admit, but I assure you, they'll take you. It played in my head like a movie reel. The title cards flashing out Mr. Locke's lines to the audience. Your father is dead, January. And then jerky scenes of a young girl crying, raving. She's gone mad, poor dear. And then a black streetcar slides beneath a stone archway reading Asylum. Lightning flashes in the background and it cuts to a scene of our heroine strapped to a hospital bed, staring listlessly at the wall. No. Mr. Locke was speaking again. It'll only be for a few months, a year maybe. I need time to talk to the society, let cooler heads prevail, demonstrate your tractable nature. He smiled at me. And even through my reeling horror, I saw the kindness in it, the apology. I wish it could be otherwise, but it's the only way I know to keep you safe. I was panting, muscles quivering. You can't. You wouldn't. Did you think you could just dabble at the edges of things? Dip a toe into these waters? These are very serious matters, January. I tried to tell you. We are enforcing the natural order of things, determining the fates of worlds. Perhaps one day you might still help us. He reached toward my face again and I recoiled. He drew a finger down my cheek the way he might have stroked a piece of imported china, delicate, covetous. It seems cruel, I know, but believe me when I tell you, this is for the best. And as his eyes met mine, I felt a weird, childish longing to trust him, to curl up inside myself and let the world flow around me as I always had, but bad. I tried to run. I really did. But my legs were still weak and wobbly, and Locke caught me around the middle before I'd made it out of the parlour. He hauled me to the coat closet, clawing and spitting, and slung me inside it the way the cook slung beef sides into the icebox. The closet door slammed, and I was trapped in the darkness with nothing but the musty, rich smell of unworn fur coats and the sound of my own breathing. Mr. Locke? It came out quavery and high-pitched. Mr. Locke, please, I'm sorry. I babbled. I begged. I cried. The door didn't open. A good heroine is supposed to sit stiff-lipped in her dungeon cell, formulating brave escape plans and hating her enemies with righteous heartiness. Instead, I begged, swollen-eyed and shivering. It's easy to hate people in books. I'm a reader too, and I know how characters can turn into villains at the drop of an authorial hat, those capital V's like dagger points or sharpened teeth. It just isn't like that in real life. Mr. Locke was still Mr. Locke, the man who had taken me under his suit-coated wing when my own father couldn't be bothered to raise me. I didn't even want to hate him. I just wanted to undo it all, to unmake the last few hours. I don't know how long I waited in the closet. This is the part of the story where time becomes fickle and flickering. Eventually there was an officious rap at the front door, and Mr. Locke's voice said, come in, gentlemen. Thank God you're here." Shuffling. Footsteps, door hinges. "She's a bit wild at the moment. You're sure you can cope with her?" Another voice said it would be no difficulty at all. He and his staff were very experienced in such matters. Perhaps Mr. Locke would like to retire to another room so as to avoid distress. No, I'd like to see it through." More booted footsteps. Then the slide clunk of the closet door unlocking and the silhouettes of 3 men framed in the afternoon light. Rough, gloved hands fastened around my upper arms and hauled me into the entryway, numb-legged. "Mr. Locke, please, I don't know anything. I didn't mean to. Don't let them take me." A cloth clamped itself over my nose and mouth, damp and honey sweet. I screamed into it, but it only grew larger and larger until my eyes and limbs were covered in muffling, sugared blackness. My last sense was of distant relief. At least in the darkness, I no longer had to see Mr. Locke's pitying eyes on mine. Y'all doing okay? It's gonna be okay. The first thing you notice is the smell. Before you're even awake, the smell twists into the darkness with you. Starch and ammonia and lye, and something else that might have been panic, distilled and fermented in the hospital walls for decades. You smell yourself too, a greasy, sweating scent like meat left out on the counter. So when I opened my eyes, a process much like pulling apart two caramels that have melted in your pocket, I wasn't surprised to find myself in an unfamiliar room with grey-green walls. All the normal elements of a bedroom seemed to be missing, leaving only a smooth expanse of polished floor and two narrow, stingy-looking windows. Even the sunlight filtering through them was somehow muted. My muscles felt unmoored, as if they'd come unhooked from my bones, and my head pounded. I was desperately thirsty. But I didn't really begin to be afraid until I tried to reach for my waistband to feel for the silver coin and couldn't. Soft woolen cuffs circled my wrists. Being afraid did nothing at all, of course, except make me sweatier. I lay there with my fear and my thumping head and my gummed-up mouth for hours, thinking of Bad and Jane and my father and how much I missed the dusty, aged smell of Lock House, and how badly, deeply wrong everything had gone. By the time the nurses finally arrived, I had wrung myself out with waiting. The nurses were iron-spined women with lye-roughened hands and coaxing voices. "Let's sit up and eat, now be a good girl," they ordered, and I was. I ate something mushy and bland that might once have been oatmeal, drank 3 glasses of water, pissed on command in an open steel container, and even lay back down on the bed when they asked and let them refasten the cuffs around my wrists. My only act of rebellion, and God, how pathetically small, was to slip the coin from my waistband and clasp it hot and round in my palm. I survived the first night by holding it and dreaming of silver-faced queens sailing foreign seas, unbound. The second morning, I was convinced a legion of grim doctors would arrive at any moment to administer drugs or beatings, the way they did in the most sensational news stories about asylums. It took me many more hours of lying on my back, staring at the dingy sunlight inching across the floor, before I remembered the lesson I'd learned as a child. It isn't pain or suffering that unmakes a person. It's only time. Time sitting on your breastbone like a black-scaled dragon, minutes clicking like claws across the floor, hours gliding past on sulphurous wings. The nurses returned twice and repeated their rituals. I was very biddable, and they cooed at me. When I stuttered that I'd like to speak to the doctor, please, because there had been a terrible mistake and I wasn't crazy, really, one of them even giggled. "He's very busy, pet. Your evaluation is scheduled for tomorrow, or at least before the end of the week." Then she patted my head, the way no adult would ever pat another adult's head, and added, "But you've been very good, so we can leave these off for tonight." The way she said it Like I should be grateful simply to be uncuffed, to have the basic human liberty of moving my arms and touching something other than overstarched sheets lit a coal in my belly. If I'd let it burn, it would have ignited a conflagration. A ravenous blaze that would have ripped apart my stiff sheets and smashed my oatmeal against the wall and turned my eyes white hot. No one would have believed I was sane after that. I smothered the coal. They left, and I stood at my window, pressing my forehead against the summer-worn glass until my feet began to ache. I lay back down. The hour dragons stalked me. They grew larger as the sun set, multiplying in the shadows. I think I might have shattered into pieces that second night and never quite found all of myself again, had it not been for an irregular, half-familiar pattering against the window. I stopped breathing. I crept out of bed and struggled against the stiff window latch, feeling the liquid weakness of my arms. It wedged open only a miserly few inches, but it was enough to let in a sweet night air smell. Enough for me to hear, far below, a familiar voice say, "January, it's you." It was Samuel. I felt for just a moment like Rapunzel must have when her prince finally showed up to rescue her from the tower, except that I couldn't have wedged myself out the window even if my hair had been long and golden rather than curled and matted. Still, "What are you doing here?" I hissed down at him. I couldn't see much more than a man-shaped shadow several floors below, holding something in its hands. "Jane sent me. She says to tell you she tried to see you, but could not." "But how did you know which window was mine?" I saw his shadow shrug, one-shouldered. "I waited. I watched. Until I saw you." I didn't say anything. I pictured him hiding in the hedges, staring up at my prison and waiting for hours and hours until he saw my face in the window, and a shiver ran down my breastbone. In my experience, the people you cared most about did not linger. They were always turning away, leaving you behind, never coming back. But Samuel had waited. He was speaking again. "Listen, Jane says it is important that you have..." He stopped. Both of us saw the yellow glow of lights flicking on through the first floor windows, heard the muffled thumps of footsteps coming to investigate. "Catch!" I called. It was a stone tied to a length of twine. "Pull it up, quick!" And he was gone, disappearing into the landscaped grounds just as the hospital doors creaked outward. I yanked the twine up through my window in panicky jerks and jammed the window closed. I slid down my room wall, panting as if it were me sprinting into the night instead of Samuel. There was something smallish and square tied to the end of the line. A book. The book. Even in the dark, I could see the half-worn lettering smiling at me like gold teeth through the gloom. The 10,000 horse. It had been a long time since Samuel had smuggled a story to me. I wondered dizzily if he'd dog-eared his favourite scenes. Several hundred questions occurred to me. How had Jane recognised the book, and why did she want me to have it? And how long would Samuel keep waiting for me if I was trapped here forever? But I ignored them. Books are doors, and I wanted out. I crawled to the centre of the floor, where there was a slanted yellow square of light from the hall. I began to read. Chapter 3. Much on doors, worlds, and words. Other worlds and the flexibility of natural laws. The city of Nin, A familiar door seen from the other side, a ghost at sea. It is a heartless thing, but it is at this juncture in our narrative that we must abandon Miss Adelaide Larson entirely. We leave her just as she sails the quay into a foreign ocean, with the salted wind blowing the pine sap out of her hair and filling her heart with glowing certainty. We do not abandon her without good reason. The time has come when we ought to discuss more directly the nature of doors themselves. I must first assure you that I did not delay this instruction out of any sly sense of theatre, but simply because I hope by now that I have gained your trust. I hope simply that you will believe me. Let us begin with the first conceit of this work. Doors are portals between one world and another, which exist only in places of particular and indefinable resonance. By indefinable resonance, I refer to the space between worlds, that vast blackness waiting on the threshold of every door, which is hideously dangerous to pass through. It is as though the borders of oneself grow dissolute with nothing pressing against them, and your very essence threatens to spill away into the void. Literature and myth are rife with tales of those who have entered the void and failed to emerge on the other side. Footnote 7. Consider all the stories of missing children, oubliettes, bottomless holes, ships sailing off the edges of oceans and into nothingness. They are not tales of journeys or passings through. They are tales of sudden, irrevocable ending. It is my belief that the traveller's character plays a role in their ultimate success or failure. Consider Edith Bland's seemingly innocent The Door to Kiriel. 5 English schoolchildren discover a magic door that takes them to a new world. As the children return home, the youngest and most fearful of them falls into a great darkness and is never heard from again. Critics considered it too grim and strange for healthy children. I consider it an advisement. When one enters a door, one must be brave enough to see the other side. Edith Bland, The Door to Kiriel, London Looking Glass Library, 1900. It seems therefore likely that doors themselves were originally constructed in places where this blackness is at its thinnest and least deadly. Convergence points, natural crossroads. And what is the nature of these other worlds? As we have discovered in previous chapters, they are infinitely varied and ever-changing, and often fail to comply with the conventions of our present world, which we are arrogant enough to call the physical laws of the universe. There are places where men and women are winged and red-skinned, and places where there's no such thing as man and woman, but only persons somewhere in between. There are worlds where the continents are carried on the backs of vast turtles swimming through freshwater oceans, where snakes speak riddles, where the lines between the dead and living are blurred to insignificance. I have seen villages where fire itself has been tamed and followed at men's heels like an obedient hound, and cities with glass spires so high they gathered clouds around their spiral points. If you are wondering why other worlds seem so brimful of magic compared to your own dreary Earth, consider how magical this world seems from another perspective. To a world of sea people, your ability to breathe air is stunning. To a world of spear throwers, your machines are demons harnessed to work tirelessly in your service. To a world of glaciers and clouds, summer itself is a miracle. My second supposition is this: that doors generate a variable but significant degree of leakage between worlds. But what sort of things leak through, and what is their fate? Men and women, of course, bringing with them the particular talents and arts of their home worlds. Some of them have come to unfortunate ends, I believe, locked in madhouses, burned at stakes, beheaded, banished, etc. But others seem to have employed their uncanny powers or arcane knowledges more profitably. They have gained power, amassed wealth, shaped the fates of peoples and worlds. They have, in short, brought change. Objects, too, have trickled through the doors between worlds, blown by strange winds, drifting on white frosted waves, carried and discarded by careless travellers, even stolen sometimes. Some of them have been lost or ignored or forgotten. Books written in foreign tongues, clothes in strange fashions, devices with no use beyond their home worlds. But some of them have left stories in their wakes. Stories of magic lamps and enchanted mirrors, golden fleeces and fountains of youth, dragon-scale armour and moon-streaked broomsticks. I have spent most of my life documenting these worlds and their riches, following the ghost trails they leave behind them in novels and poems, memoirs and treatises, old wives' tales and songs sung in 100 languages. And yet I do not feel I have come close to discovering them all, or even a meaningful fraction of them. It seems to me now very likely that such a task is impossible, although in my earlier years I harboured great ambitions in that direction. I once confessed this to a very wise woman I met in another world. A lovely world full of trees so vast one could imagine whole planets nestling in their branches, somewhere off the coast of Finland in the winter of 1902. She was an imposing woman of 50 or so, with the kind of ferocious intelligence that burns bright even through language barriers and several flasks of wine. I told her I intended to find every door to every world that ever existed. She laughed and said, "There are 10,000 of them, fool." I later learned that her people had no number higher than 10,000, and claiming there were 10,000 of a thing meant there was no purpose in counting them because they were infinite. I now believe her accounting of the number of worlds in the universe was perfectly correct, and my aspirations were the dreams of a young and desperate man. But we need not concern ourselves with all those 10,000 worlds here. We are interested only in the world that Adelaide Larson sailed into in 1893. It is not, perhaps, the most fantastical or beautiful of all possible worlds, but it is the one I long to see above every other. It is the world I have spent nearly 2 decades searching for. Authors introducing new characters often describe their features and dress first. When introducing a world, it seems polite to begin with its geography. It is a world of vast oceans and numberless tiny islands. An atlas would look strangely unbalanced to your eye, as if some ignorant artist had made a mistake and painted too much of it blue. Adelaide Larson happened to sail into the near centre of this world. The sea beneath her boat had possessed many names over the centuries, as seas often do, but was at that time most often called the Americo. It is also customary to supply a name when introducing a new character, but the name of a world is a more elusive creature than you might suspect. Consider how many names your own Earth has been assigned in how many different languages: Erde, Midgard, Telos, Ard, Ua. And how absurd it would be for a foreign scholar to arrive and give the entire planet a single title. Worlds are too complex, too beautifully fractured to be named. But for the sake of convenience, we may loosely translate one of this world's names: the Written. If this seems an odd name for a world, understand that in the Written, words themselves have power. I do not mean they have power in the sense that they might stir men's hearts or tell stories or declare truths, for these are the powers words have in every world. I mean that words in that world can sometimes rise from their ink and cotton cradles and reshape the nature of reality. Sentences may alter the weather, and poems might tear down walls. Stories may change the world. Now, not every written word holds such power. What chaos that would be. But only certain words written by certain people who combine an innate talent with many years of careful study. And even then the results are not the sort of fairy godmotherish magic you might be imagining. Even a very great word worker could not casually scrawl a sentence about flying carriages and expect one to come winging over the horizon, or write the dead back to life, or otherwise subvert the very underpinnings of the world as they are. But she might labour for many weeks to craft a story that would increase the likelihood of rain on a particular Sunday. Or perhaps she could compose a stanza that would hold her city's walls fractionally more firm against invasion, or guide a single reckless ship away from unseen reefs. There are half-forgotten stories, too faint and unbelievable even to be called legends, of greater magics. Of writers who turned back tides and parted seas, who levelled cities or called dragons down from the skies. But these tales are too unlikely to be taken seriously. Word magic comes at a cost, you see, as power always does. Words draw their vitality from their writers, and thus the strength of a word is limited by the strength of its human vessel. Acts of word magic leave their workers ill and drained, and the more ambitious the working, the more it defies the warp and weft of the world as it is, the higher the toll. Most everyday sorts of word workers lack the force of will to risk more than an occasional nosebleed and a day spent in bed. But more gifted persons must spend years in careful study and training, learning restraint and balance, lest they drain away their very lives. The people who have this talent are called different things on different islands, but most of us concur that they are born with a particular something that no degree of study can emulate. The precise nature of that something is a contentious subject among the scholars and priests. Some have claimed that it is related to their certainty of self or their scope of imagination, or perhaps the intractability of their will, for they are known to be obstreperous people. Footnote 8. Farfay even famously argued that it is sheer stubbornness and nothing else that grants them their power. As evidence, he submitted Lena Wordworker, the talented author of The Song of Ilgin, who had once saved her city from a deadly plague. She was also Farfy's wife, and apparently quite a difficult woman. Farfy Scholar, A Treatise on the Nature of Wordworkers, City of Ning, 6609. There is also great disagreement on what ought to be done with such people, and how to best to limit the chaos they naturally cause. There are islands where certain faiths preach that writers are the conduits of their God's will and ought to be treated as blessed saints. There is a series of townships in the south that have proclaimed that their writers must live separately from unlettered folk, lest they infect them with their unruly imaginations. Such extremes are rare, however. Most cities find some functional yet respectable role for their writers, and simply carry on. This was the way of things on the islands surrounding the Americo Sea. Talented writers were most often employed by universities and expected to devote themselves to the civic good and granted the surname word worker. There are, as my old acquaintance would say, 10,000 other differences between that world and yours. Many of them are too insignificant to merit documentation. I could describe the way the smells of brine and sun have permeated every stone of every street, or the way the tide callers stand at their watchtowers and cry out the hour for their cities. I could tell you of the many-shaped ships that crisscross the seas, with careful writing stitched on their sails, praying for good fortune and fair winds. I could tell you of the squid ink tattoos that adorn the hands of every husband and wife, and of the lesser word workers who prick words into flesh. But such an anthropological documenting of facts and practices will tell you little, in the end, about the nature of a world. I will tell you instead about one particular island, and one particular city, and one particular boy, who would not have been remarkable at all were it not for the day he stumbled through a door and into the burnt orange fields of another world.
It's all joining up. It's so exciting.
Yeah.
Also, there's serious competition for the cutest, snuggliest humans this evening.
Oh my God, let me have a flick through. Let me see everyone. Oh, okay. Yeah, strong. Strong. Also strong. Very strong.
I think the only solution is different categories of snuggly. Then everyone wins.
Yes, I like it when everyone wins. How are y'all doing? That was a bit rough. And I wish I were there to aftercare you all soundly. But for now...
You could tell us that everything will be okay.
It's funny you should mention that, actually. I did have something that I wanted to tell you all before we finish up for the night. This is quite important. So, you know, if anyone is in the middle of doing something, if you can just kind of pause for a moment and give me your full attention, I would appreciate that. This will be brief. Everything is going to be okay. You know? Everything is going to be okay. Thank you about your business.
Thank you for this very important public service announcement.
Yes. Tell your friends. Have another one. Why not? Oh, I can feel it. Oh, a little bit tighter, tiny bit tighter. Oh, that's a little bit less tight. Nice. Oh, should we say hello to Bina on catch up? Bina will be catching up for tonight. Bina, hello. Love you. And all of the catch-up crew, everything's going to be okay. It's all just going to be okay. It really is, you know. You know, it just is. That's just truth. Love you very much. Should we say goodbye to the catch-up crew?